Imagine it's Ramadan 2027, and the family's just eaten iftar, and Uncle Ahmed reaches over for the remote control, and he puts on the telly, and the telly lights up, and catchy music plays, and it's the next episode of the drama that everybody's watching, Pasha Street. In walks the hero. She's in her early 20s. She's Tunisian, so she's beautiful, because you're all beautiful. She's got the long flowing hair. She's got the cheekbones. And her name is, give me a Tunisian name. Aisha. She's Aisha. And she comes into the living room with the family eating dinner. Aisha. And everybody's, oh, Aisha, so good to have you. And they sit down, and there's a big iftar meal, and in the middle is kunefa, which I love. And they're eating their meal, and as the camera pans round, you see a few things in the living room that are a little futuristic. But apart from that, it's a normal Tunisian iftar scene. Until her wristband starts to glow, and a little music plays. And everybody goes, oh, it's the boyfriend. And Granny says, is it the hunky one with the muscles? And Aisha gets very embarrassed. And she runs down the stairs, and she comes out, and there on a futuristic bicycle is a very handsome man. He's muscular and sporty, and he's almost certainly got a man bun. And his name is Aziz. Did you say Aziz? You're owning the role already because you might get it. So Aziz is on his futuristic bicycle, and he does the handsome man look to Aisha. Aisha gets on her futuristic bicycle, and they ride off down Pasha Street onto what is now a main road. And that's when things get a little different. As the viewers, you suddenly notice they're in bike lanes. Beautiful, smooth bike lanes. And what else has changed? There's a lot of foliage. There's shade trees, and there's tomatoes and fruit growing up the sides of the buildings. There's probably water harvesting happening. But other than that, it's a normal Tunisian scene. And they're chatting as they ride their futuristic bicycles. And handsome Aziz is clearly not yet the boyfriend, but he's like auditioning for the role. And Aisha, knowing who she is keeping a little distance, and they chat as they ride down through this new scene of urban Tunis. And on the sides of the road, there are vendors selling fresh fruit, and there's community meetings, and there's a handicraft stall. And at the handicraft stall, there's another handsome young man. He's a little slimmer than Aziz, a bit more poetic. He's got paint on his clothes. And his name is Ali. Ghasem. His name is Ghasem. And he is the intellectual. He's selling handwritten poetry after iftar. And he looks around and he sees Aisha, and Aisha stops her bike and says, Ghasem, is that you? Scene. My name is Colin, and I work for the BBC, but I work for the BBC's international development charity, BBC Media Action. And what we do is we try to make media for good. How do we do that? Well, there's a fairly strict thinking process that goes into this. We start by defining as precisely as we can a problem that we are trying to solve or make less bad. And then we consider the different types of people that are involved in potentially solving that problem. And we look at the different obstacles or motivators to them making the change we're looking for. And then finally we consider what sort of media do they consume. And then we make that media. That is actually my job. It's amazing and awesome. Except that really my job involves a lot of emails and procurement systems that some of my colleagues here force me to sign off on. But there are genuinely moments when our team sits down together and says, what could a Tunisian Ramadan TV drama look like that would truly contribute to building a more sustainable future? And I think Pasha Street could do that, but I'll come back to why in a moment. Let me first illustrate this work with a real-world example. A few years back in India, the HIV epidemic was very serious, and a lot of really good public health work had been done to prepare some of the defenses. Condoms, for example, were known as a key part of the solution. The condoms were available, they were priced at a reasonable level, they were in the shops, and there'd been a lot of public education as to why they would help in family planning, but also to limit the spread of HIV. The problem in India at that moment was that the young men who had to buy the condoms couldn't bring themselves to go into the pharmacy and then say the word condom. So they would arrive at the counter and say, breath mints, because they couldn't say condom, which seems a little funny, but you can imagine if that was part of a major public health campaign and you had everything else in place except the normalization of that one key word, then the whole system would fail, and potentially thousands, and in the case of India, many, many thousands of lives could be lost. So we said to ourselves, what media are young men on? At that point, they were watching mainstream television and had ad breaks. And they were really into music and comedy. So we developed a ringtone using the word condom and the Indian Bollywood music style, and we spread that ringtone around India. And we had that ringtone appear condom. This actual ringtone spread around India and appeared in TV adverts. And the TV adverts, hopefully, we'll show here. So, these TV adverts then accompanied the ringtone, and in the advert, his phone would ring, he'd be slightly embarrassed, but everybody around him would react positively and say, this is someone who's comfortable with the word condom. And that was the way that we contributed to normalizing the word condom in India. Embarrassment at buying condoms dropped by 21% for people exposed to these interventions. Okay, so that's the logic for using mass media to respond to a challenging situation with condoms in India. We were not trying to solve the whole HIV epidemic. We were looking at a way that we could get men in India to say the word condom. Okay, what about the climate crisis? Vastly bigger challenge in many ways. I propose today that one of the serious obstacles to our great ideas that you're hearing today about responding to the climate crisis is the limitation of our ability to picture an alternative future based in true science, really economically and physically possible solutions that we need to be able to see to make real. There is quite a lot of mass media about the climate crisis, but it tends to be highly dramatic. Have you seen Day After Tomorrow? Anyone seen that one? So in Day After Tomorrow, like a 200-foot tidal wave crashes through the middle of Manhattan. Actually, the cast is quite similar. There's basically an Aisha, and there's an Aziz, and there's a Qasim, and they're all in a complicated love triangle, but they have a tidal wave to deal with. Now, the climate crisis is very scary, but it's unlikely to produce 200-foot tidal waves in central Manhattan. And anyway, if it does, the message of that movie is it's game over, guys. You're done. So it's not helping us do anything. There's other examples, though. Avatar, right? Avatar was presumably there to try to give us the picture of abundance and of biodiversity and fighting for nature. But I don't know about you, but I don't see myself in Avatar. The main characters in Avatar are incredibly athletic, with six-packs and a beautiful complexion. That I do relate with. But they're 20 feet tall and blue, and they mate through their hair, which I personally think is not to be encouraged. I've got great eyebrows, but I don't see myself in Avatar. However, I think there's a possibility that we would see ourselves in Pasha Street. Now, if Pasha Street, if they headed down on their bikes down a street like this in Pasha Street, they could demonstrate living in what the urban planners call a 15-minute city. A 15-minute city concept, some of you might know, it basically means everything you need regularly is within 15 minutes by bike or walk. And then, behind the scenes, there's also an effective public transport system, a tram system, for example, that's smooth and regular and whose doors don't open and allow you to fall out. And that allows you to move between the 15-minute cities. So you're not limited to your 15-minute city, but everything you generally need is there. And these 15-minute cities really are appearing around the world. There's one in Scotland, they have them in the Philippines, other parts of Europe, China, and Colombia. And what these potentially do, if these featured in a drama, would be to allow Tunisians, allow us to picture the possibility of living in cities in Tunisia where you don't have to spend all your time sitting inside a metal box, mostly on your own. Instead, it's presenting an alternative future, a future that could be more sustainable. And I think this could be a real contribution to our challenge by integrating into it the solutions that the rest of the speakers today are coming up with. Because my feeling is that it's vital that if we are going to be able to act on building a sustainable future, that we all have the capacity to picture it. Scene. Thank you.